Alright guys, this is going to be a two-part video. The first part we're going to talk about the fractions, the subfractions of an architecture scale corresponding with their scales. And the second part of the video will go over how to use the architect scale to measure after we know what our subdivision units are. So as you kind of figured out as you went through this worksheet, there's a couple questions you didn't know, which we have discussed, but the one that we definitely want to talk about is the small subdivision, or subfraction, I'm sorry, that can be measured with the following scales as we got written here. So what it's corresponding to is your actual architect scale, and as you guys all have seen, it's that triangle looking thing, and every side is different. Whether it is the 3/16 and 16ths, or it's the 3/32, and if we roll over it changes every side. So what it's simply asking, guys, is the small subdivision is simply saying, what, if you were to look at a scale, does the mark next to the 0 represent? Because we all notice that you will notice that every 0 has a small mark next to it, because it's going to be the smallest subdivision. So with the previous video you should have already watched at this time, it talks about the 16th scale, which means that it's a 1-to-1 scale, meaning part 1 is the same size as part 1 duplicated, meaning 1 inch is 1 inch. 1 foot is 12 inches. It's the same thing, same length, just like any ruler you would have at your house. But when we're using a scale, like these following scales here, okay, excluded the 16ths, it's asking what is the smallest subdivision for these. So just real quick, let's recap on the 16th inch. We all know that this is 1 inch, which means half of 1 inch is a half of an inch, and half of an inch is a quarter. Half of a quarter is an eighth. Half of an eighth is a 16th. 16ths, because if you counted all these little dashes up, it would equal up to 16, which means 16, real quick, 16 over 16 equals 1 inch, right? Now, a half, if we look at here, we count them up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, is 8/16. But we know they both can be reduced down to 1/2. Same goes for the quarter. Okay, quarter would be 4/16, which reduces down to 1/4, right? And then we got 2/16, which equals 1/8, and then the last one is 1/16 equals 1/16. 1/2, which is an eighth of an inch, but 2/16 reduces down to an eighth. Same thing here, 4/16, 1, 2, 3, 4/16 reduces down to a quarter. And then, as you can tell, we can keep going. So if a person ever got confused on a 16th scale, they could literally just count all the dashes and then see if the fraction needs to be simplified. Okay, so if we look at this scale, here's 1 inch. Therefore, that one next to it must be a 16th of an inch. So our answer for this is simply 1/16 of an inch, right? Now, the next part we need to look at is the 3/16 scale. So now we're going to zoom in here and we're going to see what we're looking at. But one thing to always remember is scales, the whole point of them is to scale an object up or scale it down depending on how you're using it. But for our understanding, we're trying to find the small subdivision. So our scale would read this: 3/16 equals 1 foot 0 inches. All right, let's zoom into this guy. Here we are. Okay, it's hard to imagine But because of our scale, 3/16 equals a foot, that means from here to there must equal 1 foot. And how many inches go in a foot? 12. Which means there's going to be 12 inches from here to here. One thing you'll notice about any scale, including this one, is they'll have long lines, medium lines, short lines. They all do that for a purpose, to physically subdivide it by just simply looking at it. Same thing goes here. There's a tall one, there's a medium one, there's a small one. So if we go back to this, this is 12 inches. Notice, the next step we must do in order to find out what the smallest line represents, because that's what we're trying to figure out is the small subdivision, is we must break it down from the highest length lines to the smallest ones. So we know this is 12, we know this is 0. Notice the next tallest line, is there one or is there two? Or is there multiple ones? In our case, there's just one, which means it must equally break this space up between the 12 and the 0 up into 2 equal spaces because there's only one line. So we simply just go 12 divided by 2, because 2 equal spaces, equals 6. 12 divided by 2 is 6, which means that tall line is 6 inches. Okay, now we look between the 6 and we look between the 0. There's one more tall one, all by itself. Same principle. This is 6, this is 0. There's 2 equal spaces, which means 6 divided by 2 equals 3. So that one right there represents 3 inches. Alright, we're not to the smallest one yet. So if you can see that, let's see if we can get in a little bit closer. Okay, so we know this one is 3, and now we got 3 and 0, which means there's 2 lines there. And if there's 2 lines, there must be 1, 2, 3 spaces. So what is 3 divided by 3? It's 1. So these very small lines represent 1 inch. If we were to bring this over here and fill out our scale, 3/16 equals 1 inch. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to do the 3/32 scale, and then we're going to do the 3-inch scale. And then after this video, you're going to go to part 2 to learn how to read the architect scale and figuring measurements. So let's go back to here. Here we are. My objective is to find the small subdivision. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus in. I'm going to look at what I got here, and I must always remember that this is 1 foot. Doesn't matter what scale I go to. 3/32, I go to a half, an eighth, 3 or 3/4. Doesn't matter the length of these guys, right? I'm always going to do that. 1 minute. Oh, I can't pause. Yeah, I can't pause. Can you give me a minute?
I was just gonna ask you if you had any idea what it would cost to do that thing on my truck for that loading thing.
If you bring it by my shop, I can look at it.
All right.
Have I given you a business card?
Yeah, you did.
Okay, just call me up and let's on the weekend stop on by,
Okay.
and that way we can look at it and I can tell you how much it's going to cost you.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Cool.
I
All
didn't
right.
mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, no worries. Hey, have a good one.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, buddy.
Yep. All right, so there's 1 foot, which means there must be 12 inches in a foot. Okay, I'm looking at this. Between the 12 and the 0, there's a tall line, and there's only one of them, which means there must be 2 equal spaces. So I must go 12 divided by 2, which comes up to 6. So that tall one is 6 inches. Now, if we get into this guy a little bit closer, maybe we can see the other ones. Okay, there's 6. There's 0. There's 2 lines, 1, 2, which means there's 1, 2, 3 spaces. So 6 divided by 3 is 2. So the smallest subdivision for the 3/32 scale is simply 2 inches. Roll it over here. 3/32, 2 inches. Now I'm going to leave this one for you, but we're going to go to the 3-inch scale. Here we go. One thing you will notice about the 3-inch scale is that it's a lot bigger, which makes it easier for us. But at the same time, if you don't grasp the basics of how to physically break it up, then you're going to struggle with it. Always keep in mind, real quick, just so I can write this, it goes from 1 inch to a 1/2 inch to a 1/4 inch to an 1/8 of an inch to a 1/16 of an inch. That's the subfractions within an inch. Okay. Now, here we are. We're back to here. 3:30 seconds, right? Zoom in. Remember, oh, we already did this one. I'm sorry. We're going to the 3 inch, aren't we? Yeah, here we are. Okay. Okay. Remember, it doesn't matter the size of this. This is a 3 inch per foot scale, which simply means this is 1 foot. The cool part about this scale is that it actually tells you how many inches this is. There's 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch, 5 inch, and so on, all the way up to your 12 inch. The thing that we need to figure out is the smallest line and what does it represent. So if we know this is an inch, notice between the inch and the 0, how many lines are in between? There's only one tall one. Remember, we start with the tallest, work our way down. So there's a tall one, which means there must be 1, 2 spaces. So what's 1 divided by 2? Of course, 1/2. Okay, now we got to do it again because that's still not the smallest one. There's a 1/2. There's 0. There's another tall one, which means there's 2 more spaces. What is 1/2 of a 1/2? If you have 50 cents and I take half of it, you got 25, which is a 1/4. So there's your 1/4. Now, that's still not the smallest one. There's a 1/4. There's 0, and there's only 1 now, which means there's 2 equal spaces, which simply means that's a 1/4. That must be an 1/8. So the small subdivision for the 3 inch per foot scale is 1/8. Remember, they step down just like this. So our answer for the 3 inch scale is 1/8 of an inch. Make sense? Okay guys, your whole objective is now to figure this out by yourself to see if you got it, and then when you come to get your following worksheet, which looks like these two, I verify if you got your subdivisions right. Easy enough. Alright guys.